Welcome back to True Crime Documentary, where we dive into the darker side of human nature. Today we're going to explore a shocking case that will leave you speechless, a case that will make you question the very fabric of our society. It was a typical day in the quiet town of Auckland, New Zealand, a place known for its picturesque landscapes, unique wildlife, and a high standard of living. But behind the facade of tranquility, a horror story was unfolding. Meet the angry man who stormed out of his house, slamming the door behind him. He was visibly nervous, muttering to himself as he ran his hand through his disheveled black hair. But what was driving him to such a state of fury? As he stormed back into the house, he grabbed a baseball bat lying at the entrance. The tension was palpable, and then he let out a violent scream, shouting at the top of his lungs. A blonde-haired young woman, terrified, ran out of the house only to be met with brutal force. The angry man struck her on the head with the bat, leaving her unconscious and bleeding profusely on the floor. The enraged man continued to strike the immobilized woman, fueled by a rage that seemed to know no bounds. It's hard to fathom how such a heinous crime could occur in a place like New Zealand, where crime is virtually non-existent. New Zealand, a country known for its stunning natural beauty, its unique flora and fauna, and its comfortable climate. A place where people live in harmony, with a high standard of living, and a measured, calm way of life. But today, we're going to disrupt that tranquility and delve into the dark underbelly of human nature. Meet Carmen Thomas and Brad, a couple who met on an ordinary day that would later become a fateful day for them both. Carmen, born on October 30th, 1987 in South Africa, had a tumultuous childhood. Her father died when she was just 10 years old, and her family moved to relatives in Whitby, UK. But the peace they sought never came, and they eventually moved back to South Africa. Carmen, now over 18 years old, decided to stay with her relatives in Whitby, UK. Later, she moved to London, where she completed her studies and earned a master's degree in marketing. With a strong and mischievous personality, Carmen attracted people easily. She was a loyal friend and comrade to many, but living in a large metropolis like London came with a high price tag. To maintain a decent standard of living, Carmen worked hard, holding down a day job as a marketer in a store and a part-time job in a gentleman's club. Despite her unconventional choice of part-time work, Carmen was a girl with strict rules and never allowed herself to engage in unnecessary or undignified behavior. This earned her the respect of important clients. It was at the gentleman's club that she met an attractive and flamboyant man named Brad. Brad Callahan, born in New Zealand in April 1978, had a tumultuous childhood. His parents separated when he was just 9 years old, and he stayed with his mother. They later moved to Australia. In 2001, Brad graduated from university with an engineering degree in the construction industry. He was offered a position as chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK. For important negotiations and to boost his status, Brad turned to a gentleman's agency, where he met the beautiful Carmen. The man was intelligent, tall and dark-haired with bright dark eyes. However, his ambition and busy career left him no time for a permanent relationship. After a successful business dinner, Brad was captivated by the open and radiant Carmen. They continued to communicate informally, and their encounters became a regular occurrence. As time passed, Carmen and Brad's friendship blossomed into love. The romantic period flew by quickly, and the lovers soon began living together. Their life was built on trust and care, and they genuinely supported each other, appearing absolutely happy. After a while, Carmen became pregnant, and Brad decided that the best solution for them would be to return to New Zealand, a country with clean air and a more relaxed pace of life. They moved to Auckland in March 2005, and Carmen gave birth to their son, Jack. Jack brought immense joy and happiness into their lives, and from the very beginning, Carmen and Brad prioritized his safety and provided everything he needed for a happy childhood. To them, Jack was the most important thing in their lives. However, with the birth of their son, serious disagreements arose in their relationship. The first misunderstandings appeared due to differences in their approach to raising Jack. The relationship between the lovers became turbulent and unstable, and after 3 years they parted ways, retaining joint custody of their child. The breakup was difficult for both of them, but they sincerely tried to maintain a good relationship for the sake of little Jack. Wanting support and a sense of family, Carmen and Jack moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. Gradually, emotional balance returned to Carmen, and she began a new life without Brad. In 2008, Carmen moved with her young son to a house on a neighboring street to Brad's, so that Jack could be closer to his father. The young woman, who had lost her own father at an early age, sincerely wished for her child to always have a father figure in his life, as much as possible. Despite their decision to separate, many of Carmen's friends and family thought the couple still had a good friendship. However, they only spent time together for Jack's sake. Life went on, and Carmen and Brad tried to find happiness separately. Brad continued to work as a construction engineer and started a new relationship with a girl in May 2009. He even got engaged. Carmen, on the other hand, was busy raising their son and resumed her services at the Gentlemen's Club, which hurt Brad deeply. He sincerely believed that the mother of his child should never again be involved in dubious earnings. This disagreement became a boiling point in their already strained relationship. As time passed, the situation grew more heated. Carmen gave ultimatums to Brad, but he simply ignored her requests. Nevertheless, Brad entered into a new marriage and was preparing to become a father again. His new financial obligations directly affected the alimony he paid to Carmen for Jack's maintenance. The money became the last straw in a series of scandals. On March 19, 2010, neighbors called the police, reporting an incident of domestic violence. Carmen had attacked Brad during another quarrel and received a warning. The relationship finally deteriorated, and arguments continued even at a distance. Each new question regarding Jack was perceived by each party as a threat, and aggression escalated. The once loving parents could not agree on what school Jack should attend, leading to a chain of unsolvable problems and scandals. On June 29, 2010, Brad came to Carmen's house to make a new written agreement to pay child support and discuss a new school for Jack. However, Carmen was not satisfied with the document and kicked Brad out of the house, yelling that Jack was not his son. On July 13, 2010, he reported Carmen Thomas missing to the police. The authorities took the report and began searching for the missing woman. Using video camera images and interviews with neighbors, investigators reconstructed the chronology of events since the last communication between Carmen and Brad. They uncovered some crucial details that would aid in the search for the woman. For instance, a surveillance camera recorded Carmen at a supermarket near her home on June 29th. When inspecting the rented house where Carmen lived with Jack, the police noticed the absence of a garbage can outside. Inside the house, they found traces of blood on the front door, washing machine near the sink, and shower. Forensic scientists used luminol to detect blood traces at the crime scene, which reacts with the iron contained in blood hemoglobin. The multiple patterns that appeared confirmed the presence of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlady told investigators that on June 29th she heard loud screaming followed by prolonged crying and moaning. Recalling that day, she said she knocked on Carmen's door but no one answered. She had to look out the window where she saw a street trash can and an overturned fabric horse, a drying rack usually made of wood or metal for drying clothes. Startled, the landlady called her husband, but while she waited for him to arrive, Brad walked out of Carmen's house and into the driveway. As Brad walked out of Carmen's house, he was carrying soiled clothes in his hands. Upon seeing the landlady, Brad rushed to explain that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlady noticed that Brad looked like he had just taken a shower. She had no reason to disbelieve Brad's story and didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone caught the attention of the police. Messages were being sent from her phone on a regular basis, but the manner of communication and tone of the messages were different and didn't resemble Carmen's previous way of communicating. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. The investigators wondered where Carmen had gone, if she needed medical help, and why. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they found luggage, clothes, and other belongings of the woman. The examination of the seized suitcase revealed traces of blood on some of the items. A note was also found in the car, indicating that Carmen owed money to the agency where she worked. In the glove compartment, an envelope with Misty's name on it and the sum of $270 was discovered. Police Inspector Mark Benfield, after finding traces of blood in Carmen's car, first raised the possibility that the woman had been murdered. Going forward, one of the most important pieces of evidence was the missing trash can. It remained to be seen what significance it held in the case. The police wondered if the missing trash can was the same one that had disappeared from its place near the house, which a neighbor had seen through her window on the day Carmen disappeared. But what did the trash can need to be inside the house for? On June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags. By scrutinizing Brad's daily routine, police identified some exceptional events that didn't fit into the young father's daily to-do list. It turned out that on one workday, Brad arrived at the construction site very early and walked alone around the property for a long time. While it was strange, it wasn't strange enough for the workers who saw him to report anything about the early presence of a supervisor at the construction site. Based on the evidence gathered, such as Carmen's cell phone and questionable purchases, Brad went from victim to suspect. Police believed that Brad Callahan had killed his former lover by hitting her several times in the head and carefully hiding the body. On September 21st, Brad Callahan was arrested on charges of murdering Carmen Thomas and attempting to change the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty and was scheduled to stand trial. In a fateful coincidence, Brad's second son from a new lover was born at the time of his incarceration, which caused a wave of emotion and resentment in the young father who was in custody. The man broke down, and 9 days after his arrest, he pointed out to investigators the burial place of Carmen Thomas. Brad thought he had come up with the perfect plan, part of which was to make it appear that Carmen had gone to Hamilton and never returned. He was absolutely certain he had succeeded, but life made adjustments. Under questioning, he detailed the chain of events from that fateful day. After a bad conversation, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house, yelling that Jack was not his son. Brad left, but 5 minutes later he came back into the house and hit Carmen in the head with a baseball bat with such force that she immediately fell unconscious. Blood spurted from her wound, staining the floor a bright red. Heavy breathing filled the room, and Brad stood over the body of his victim with a wild scowl in his eyes. As Brad stood over Carmen's lifeless body, he realized he had just done the irreparable. But he couldn't stop. In a fit of anger and resentment at Carmen's words, he threw several punches again. He knew that his act carried irreparable consequences, but everything remained in the shadow of his insane obsession. Memories flashed before Brad's eyes, happy and endless memories that were now gone forever. Brad knew that his life would be forever changed after that disastrous moment, and that he would not be able to get back everything that was. But it didn't set him back at all, because by such an act, he had solved his main problem, and Jack was now only his. Having come to his senses, Brad took a shower and then quietly left Carmen's house. In the days that followed, he sprang into action to get rid of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. Callahan called his friend and arranged to meet him outside a supermarket. He asked him to buy 3 black garbage bags, a bottle of kerosene, and cleaning products, and waited for him outside the store, hoping to avoid suspicion. Brad then went back into the apartment and cleaned it up. He carefully wiped up the blood spatter and then wrapped the body in a bag and took it out in a trash can. In the following days, the defendant dismembered Carmen's body into 8 pieces to prepare it for disposal. He cut Carmen's legs from her torso at the hip joints, each leg cut through the knee into two pieces. Her arms and head were also severed from her torso. On July 3rd, he met a good friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay near downtown Auckland. He told him that he had killed Carmen during an argument and needed help disposing of the body. But an attempt to dump the remains into the sea failed due to the friend's refusal to provide a boat. Over the next few days, he drove to Waikiri Ridge in West Auckland and buried the containers in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He put a suitcase of clothes and several other bags of her personal belongings in the car to give the impression that the woman wanted to leave. But in his haste, Brad overlooked the fact that the suitcase also contained bloody clothes. After getting rid of the car, Brad began sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to give the impression that she was still alive. The criminal texted her friend saying she wasn't feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. But Brad's perfect plan backfired on him. On October 1st, police went to the burial site Brad had indicated and discovered the body. Carmen Thomas's remains were found in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Waikiri Ridge. An autopsy determined that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family for burial. On October 13th, a private funeral was held at Green Lane Christian Center for Carmen Thomas, a young mother, a cheerful, kind and successful woman. Little Jack, who had all along waited and hoped to see and hug his mom, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, the first court hearing for Carmen Thomas took place. Judge Wenning found the crime committed was unintentional and took into account Brad's explanation that he acted on emotion. He acknowledged that it was done in a fit of rage, but Judge Wenning was less lenient when it came to the cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was newly charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A summary of the police case shows that at 8:45 a.m. on July 29, 2010, Callahan struck Mrs. Thomas several times in the head, resulting in her death. He then texted a friend to bring 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. During the ensuing period, Callahan dismembered Miss Thomas's body into 8 pieces to prepare it for disposal. On November 25, 2011, a retrial was held. Police officers who had been working on the case filled the High Court in Auckland. When Bradford Callahan unexpectedly made 2 guilty pleas, Brad Callahan, who had previously denied guilt, suddenly admitted to murder and attempting to change the course of justice. After Carmen's death, the judge said it was one of the most serious cases of attempting to pervert the course of justice. Calling Brad's actions just about the most serious case of attempted perversion of justice there can be, the judge also felt that the murder of Carmen Thomas was brutal, but not so brutal as to result in the harshest sentencing laws. The 33-year-old man was sentenced in Auckland High Court, where a large public gallery was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who were visiting from South Africa. Judge Wenning sentenced Brad Callahan to life imprisonment for murder and 6 years in prison for attempting to pervert the course of justice. He also condemned the lengths Callahan went to in order to cover his tracks. The sentences are to be served concurrently. Judge Wenning also said that the minimum sentence for the perverting the course of justice charge was insufficient to bring Brad Callahan to justice. In a statement, the Thomas family said, "Nothing can bring our Carmen back, and we are still angry because of it, but we are grateful that Brad will be away for an extended period of time, so he can reflect on the enormous damage he caused to our own son in the first place." Carmen Thomas's mother, Teresa Scott, told the court in a victim impact statement that she felt completely destroyed by what happened to her daughter. After the verdict was announced, the officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Inspector Mark Benefield, told the court that justice done is the result of hundreds of hours of police work over the past 10 weeks since Carmen Thomas was reported missing on July 13, 2010. During the interview, Detective Mark Benefield explained what the work to find Carmen consisted of. He explained that early on in the missing person investigation, the investigation determined that Carmen was most likely murdered, and the work of gathering evidence and researching information was carefully conducted. This required a great deal of time and effort to gather, and it was also necessary that proper legal procedures were followed. Detective Mark Benefield reported that over the last few weeks, close cooperation with the defendant's employer had not been finalized. Attempts to further investigate part of the Victoria Street construction site would continue in order to find any evidence that might assist the investigation. Until today, we have been unable to comment on media reports about our activities at the facility because we have been very sensitive to the issues of litigation and preemptive contempt of court, said Mark Benefield. He did not rule out the possibility of further arrests and charges in connection with Carmen's death in the near future. Brad Callahan had the courage to take responsibility for his actions in this tragic saga and pleaded guilty to 2 charges. However, that will in no way change what he did. For the hearts of Carmen's loved ones are broken, their world shattered. Living each new day without Carmen, each of her close family members feels completely destroyed. "We will never forgive him for what he did to our family," said Carmen Thomas's mother, Teresa Scott. "I could forgive someone for taking a life under certain circumstances, but I can never forgive this man for being able to strip a body and hide it in containers." Carmen's stepfather added that Brad Callahan's attorney, Stuart Grieve, said his client acted responsibly and does not intend to file an appeal. The sentence, with parole eligibility after 13 years and 8 months, has been criticized as a ridiculous miscarriage of justice. The case has received extensive media coverage in New Zealand, where only about 50 murders occur each year. It's possible that there was an overbearing bias against the victim at trial because of her line of work. However, even if Carmen was antagonistic and angered Brad, we don't blame the victim for having her life taken from her. In summarizing this gruesome story, the same question comes up repeatedly. What feelings can a healthy person have when he comes up with a plan to dismember a once tenderly loved person? Little Jack Callahan is currently living in another town under an assumed name in the temporary care of his grandmother. He doesn't know that his daddy took his mom's life, and must never find out because it wasn't his fault. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel for more shocking stories ahead.